Hello, and welcome to our first NetPro Cisco Support Community Live Ask the Expert event in Cisco Live and Networkers Virtual. Today, during the event, our expert will be answering your question on Campus QoS with Cisco switches. My name is Annette Veal, and I'm the manager of Cisco Live and Networkers Virtual here at Cisco. Our expert joining me today is Edison Ortiz, Routing and Switching CCIE number 17943, Networking Consulting Engineer, Advanced Services here at Cisco. Edison, as I said, is a network consulting engineer with our advanced services team. His team concentrates on supporting the New York financial companies in terms of network design, deployment, and troubleshoot. Welcome, Edison.
Hi, Danette. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for joining us today. Before we get started, I'd like to briefly outline the format for today's Ask the Expert event. Edison will start with a short presentation on Campus QoS with Cisco switches for around the first 25 minutes of the program, and then we'll dive into the live question submissions for the remainder of the event. During our live presentation, you may submit a question to be answered by Edison and a team of Cisco technical experts using the Submit box. Simply type your question and click Submit to submit it. To see the latest questions and answers during today's presentation, be sure to click the refresh button that is along the bottom of your slides. The team of technical experts is well-versed in routing, switching, and MPLS technology, so please start posting your questions now to give us the best chance of answering them. We'll also be posting polling questions during this webcast, and we encourage you to participate by answering them. Okay, so let's get started with today's event. I'd actually like to start with a polling question. Our first polling question for the day is, when are you looking to design Campus QoS? Within 2 years? Within 1 year? Within 6 months? Within 3 months? Or not applicable? Again, the question was, when are you looking to design Campus QoS? Within 2 years? Within 1 year? Within 6 months? Within 3 months? Or not applicable? Please go ahead and answer that poll question now. We will review the results of that poll momentarily, so again, I encourage you to submit your response. So I'd like to hand the mic over to Edison, who will provide us with an overview on Campus QoS considerations. Edison?
Thank you, Danette. When you embark into a QoS design, we recommend starting with the objectives, not the tool. First, you need to identify if the QoS will be used for voice, video, data, or some denial of service mitigation. Once you identify what application QoS will service, talk to upper management about the changes that are about to take place and get an endorsement. Next, determine how many classes of traffic are required to meet the organizational objectives. Keep in mind, while more classes provide more granular services, it does add complexity into the QoS design. So the question is, how many classes of traffic do I really need? You can start with the basic 5-class model, which consists of voice, core signaling, critical data, best effort, and a scavenger. Over time, you could streamline the original 5-class model and move into the 8-class model, which consists of voice, video, core signaling, network control, critical data, bulk data, best effort, and a scavenger. The most granular approach, but also the most complex, will be using the QoS baseline model. This model will consist of voice. On the video, we separate interactive and streaming video. Next, we have core signaling. On the network control class, we separate IP routing and network management, followed by critical data, where we make a distinction between mission critical and transactional data. Then we have bulk data, best effort, and a scavenger. Once you select the classes, the next question is, where classification and marking should be done? We suggest to always perform QoS in hardware. There are plenty of caveats when performing QoS in Catalyst switches. Make sure to read the QoS documentation for each platform and become aware of any caveats. There are times the QoS configuration will work in some switches, but it will be running in software. This may create high CPU and place a denial of service in your switch. Classify and mark the packets as close to the source as possible, and use DSCP markings whenever it's possible. DSCP will allow you to incorporate more applications into the QoS design, as it provides more granular service. Follow the DSCP per hop behavior standard marking, which I will cover in this slide. I also recommend you to read the following RFCs. RFC 2474, which cover the class selector points. RFC 2597, which cover the short forwarding classes. RFC 3246, which cover expedite forwarding. As I stated before, we recommend you to follow the standard for markings. RFC 4994 addresses this concern. This table represents the application and the respective markings. You may notice course signaling is considered to be CS5 and broadcast video is considered to be CS3. If you are running a Cisco-only network, you will find course signaling is usually tagged with CS3 and broadcast video is usually tagged with CS5. With this design, you'll be using a Cisco Model 5 RFC 4994. If you are running a multi-vendor network and you want to deploy QoS end-to-end, we recommend following the RFC 4994, not the Cisco Model 5 RFC 4994. Now, we are going to talk about policing. Where and how policing should be done. We recommend placing policers inbound as close to the source as possible. We also recommend you perform markdown on exceeded traffic if dropping the traffic flow is not an option. For instance, traffic flow marking as AF11 can be marked down to AF12 or AF13. I recommend reading RFC 2597 on the markdown process with assured forwarding. I also want to mention non-AF classes do not have a markdown scheme, so you can mark down non-AF classes by tagging the traffic flow as CS1, which is a scavenger. QoS can also be useful for containing denial of service within your network. But first, you need to profile your network to determine what traffic flow is deemed to be normal versus abnormal, and you must do so before denial of service occurs, not during the denial of service. At the line access layer, you can deploy service policies to tag abnormal traffic as CS1. You can also deploy a second line of defense with microflow policers if you have a Catalyst 6500 with a SUB 720 or Catalyst 4500 at the distribution layer. You should build your QoS design with a scavenger class in mind, and make sure to deploy this class across the campus, at the WAN, and also at the VPN. Egress queuing is the only way to provide service guarantees. A minimum of 25% should be allocated to the default class, and the priority queuing should be limited to 33%. The scavenger class should be created, and a minimum bandwidth guarantee should be assigned, roughly less than 5%. To ensure consistent PHB, we recommend applying the same format in all sessions of the network. We also recommend enabling WRED for TCP flows. This diagram gives you a graphical representation of how the percentage should be allocated between classes while using the 5-class model. with this diagram, it covers the A-class model and also the baseline model.
Thanks, Edison. It was a very informative presentation so far. I want to take a short break so that we can review the results of the polling questions with the audience. So, the question we had was, when are you looking to design Campus QoS? And I did see a question come over from one of our viewers that asked, why didn't you already give me the option for an already deployed? Very good question. We should have actually included that as one of the answers. So if you had already deployed, I'm going to assume that you chose not applicable. But very interesting results here insofar as the majority of our viewers are looking at deploying Campus QoS within 3 months. And that's a 43.5%. So it seems like we've got the right audience here, Edison. Hopefully they're going to learn quite a bit from you over the course of this.
Hopefully.
All right, and then before I hand it back over to Edison, I'm going to take a moment to ask another polling question of our audience. I'm going to modify this question based off of that question that was submitted earlier about what if it's already deployed. So, will you be or have you been using Cisco switches or routers for this design? And the question we have here is yes, no, don't know, undecided, or not applicable. So, I'm going to go ahead and push that to the audience, and I'm going to ask it one more time. Will you be or have you been using Cisco switches or routers for this design? And that is answer-wise a yes, no, don't know, undecided, or not applicable. So again, please take a moment to submit your response now, and we will review the poll results shortly. Okay, so Edison, I'm going to hand it back over to you so you can take it away.
Thank you, Danette. QoS is required in the campus in all devices where QoS is supported. At the server farm, switch ports connected to servers should be set to no trust. Policing should be applied inbound, and if traffic from the server was to become abnormal, we recommend marking that traffic as CS1. At the user VLAN, switch ports connected to phones will be conditionally trusted, and policing should be applied to detect abnormal traffic. Inter-switch links should be trusted with DSCP, and per-user microflow policing should be implemented at the distribution layer if supported. Again, microflow policing is only supported on Catalyst 6500, Sub 720, or Catalyst 4500. On this diagram, it displays 3 options. At the user VLAN, if an IP phone is connected to the switch, the phone will become the trusted endpoint. If there aren't any IP phones, the switch will be the trusted endpoint, and the PC connected to the switch isn't trusted. If the LAN access switch does not support QoS, or QoS isn't enabled on the switch, the trusted endpoint will be the distribution switch. This design is deemed to be suboptimal. The following are the endpoints and the endpoint categories. Trusted endpoint devices can be analog gateways, IP conferencing stations, or video conferencing gateways. Conditionally trusted endpoint devices can be wireless IP phones, servers, or client PCs. Untrusted endpoints can be video surveillance units or wireless access points. The following slide illustrates how the trust boundary is formed with an IP phone. First, the switch and phone exchange CDP. At the same time, the trust boundary is extended to the IP phone. Second, the phone sets the class of service value to 5 for voice over IP, and 3 for call signaling. Third, the phone rewrites any class of service marking from the PC to class of service 0. Fourth, the switch trusts the class of service from the phone and maps this class of service marking to DSCP for egress queuing. The next question is whether to trust or not at the switchboard. The answer is it depends on the endpoint, and there are 3 models. The first model is the trusted endpoint. The second model is the untrusted endpoint. The third model is the conditionally trusted endpoint and is often seen when devices are connected via an IP phone. Let's start by discussing the trusted endpoint model. With this model, DSCP is accepted and admitted into the network without any modifications to the packet. As we discussed, you can apply policing for abnormal traffic, but this is optional. If you have a soft phone in your PC, all applications running from the PC will be untrusted, with the exception of the soft phone. You can create ACLs and apply an inbound service policy to determine the correct application to be trusted. This slide provides some example of the UDP and TCP port to track and the size of the packet. This design may vary depending on the soft phone vendor. At the server form, if you need to mark certain applications, this slide will provide some guidance on how it can be done with an inbound policer. Traffic within the application guidelines will be marked appropriately, and traffic outside those guidelines will be marked as regular data traffic or scavenger. There are 2 levels of conditional trusting. Let's start with the basic level. At the basic level, the phone will be the only device to receive a special QoS markings. That is markings other than DSCP0. As you notice, the IP phone barrier traffic and signaling are marked accordingly. At the advanced level, the device sitting behind the phone can also receive the special QoS markings if the traffic flow meets the ACL's requirements, and this design can be accomplished with an inbound policer. With this slide, I conclude today's presentation on Campus QoS. I want to thank everyone for joining today's session, and I hope to see every one of you in our Net Pro forum. Thank you, Lynette.
Thank you, Edison. So make sure you're submitting your questions for Edison now. We're going to spend the rest of the hour here with some questions from the audience. But before we get started with that, I want to share the final polling results with everyone. The question again was, will you be or have you been using Cisco switches or routers for your Campus QoS design? And overwhelmingly, we got 85% saying yes. So that's great news for Cisco, obviously, but also good news for the audience, because now Edison can really take your specific questions on what you're thinking around the switches or routers that you might be using for your Campus QoS design and answer them real time for you. So again, thank you everyone for participating in the event poll. So now it's time to answer some of the questions our viewers have submitted today. But by the way, if you can't stay with us for the rest of this discussion, we will ask that you can complete an evaluation. You can do that by clicking on the evaluation button. This will let us know how this session met your business needs and expectations, and we do a little incentive here for the first 25 listeners who complete the evaluation. They'll receive a $25 USD Cisco Marketplace coupon that you can use towards Cisco gear, etc. So again, take a moment, please, to submit that question, that evaluation. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started with some questions from the audience. Let's see here. I have a question from Karen Westmoreland. She's asking, my access layer switches are 3750. Is NBAR available for 3750 for marking? Again, that question, Edison, was my access layer switches are 3750. Is NBAR available for 3750 for marking?
MBAR. I'd like to expand what is MBAR.
Sure. So we'll get some clarification on what was that? What's
Maybe
NBAR?
MBAR? You're talking about MBAR?
NBAR. Yeah, I'm just reading it.
Sorry.
I see it.
No
Sorry.
problem. I'm sorry, but MBAR is not supported within the ASIC on the 3750 switches. He will have, the person will have to upgrade. On the switches, we only support MBAR with a SUB32 on the 6500.
Okay. So hopefully that answered the question there. Next question I have here. Let's see here. This is also from Karen. We are using multicast for my company's internal webcast. How should I mark the multicast traffic? CS5, broadcast video, or AF4 multimedia streaming?
It depends on the application. If the application is really important to the network, you should follow the guidelines about mission-critical data and mark it accordingly. Mission-critical data, from what we saw in the presentation, will be marked with AF41. So we recommend that if multicast, that flow of multicast is deemed to be mission-critical data, it should be marked as so. So AF41 is what I recommend.
Okay, thank you very much. And keep those questions coming, everybody. We're going to have plenty of time here. Let's see here. Another question that we had is, if you have a DS3 45 megabytes per second and have two priority queues, each at 10%, one for voice and one for video, if there is no voice or video traffic on the link, can the default class utilize all of the link?
Yes. Priority queuing will not be taking away bandwidth from the total queue. So it will only be used when there are actual usage for the PQ. If the PQ is not being used, the class default will be able to utilize the full DS3.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, let's see here. So I have another question here, which is, why do I lose my QoS markings after enabling MLS QoS on a switch?
By default, when you enable MLS QoS, all switch ports in the switch will become untrusted. So if you don't set the switch port to be trusted, you automatically assume that the directly connected device, any markings coming in, is not to be trusted, so it's going to be rewriting the marking to 0.
Okay. I'm just looking through our queue right now. Here we go. Why can't I configure egress shaping? Sorry, this is an acronym for me. CBWFK. Yes, let me start that over. Why can't I configure egress shaping, CBWFQ or LLQ on Catalyst switches?
The reason that you're unable to configure those features is due to the fact that Catalyst switches have line ports. If you are looking to implement some kind of advanced shaping, we recommend in the 6500 to purchase a SIP spot module, or now with this Catalyst 4500 and SUB 6E, you could actually implement those features. Those features are not available on the 3750 nor 3560.
Excellent. Okay, I have a question here from Suresh Kalia. Hopefully I said the name right. The question is, how can we test QoS?
Testing QoS the answer will depend on the hardware. I recommend going into the QoS documentation for the hardware you're dealing with and look for the configuration guidelines on what kind of command to implement to test the QoS. On the 6500, QoS could be tested with a different method, and you got to enable sometimes NetFlow to see if the QoS markings are taking place. On the Catalyst 3560 and 3750, you could implement some show MLS QoS commands, which will show you the statistics of the ports.
Excellent. I have a question here from Kevin Colo. When will Cisco simplify and converge QoS configuration for hardware-based platforms like the 6500 with multiple line cards. We learned the modular QoS CLI for software iOS platforms, but this knowledge is not really applicable to switches.
I totally agree, and we are heading towards that direction with the implementation of modular QoS with the Catalyst 4500 with the Supervisor 6E. The 6E will be using full MQC CLI, which is available on regular iOS routers. That implementation will also be coming soon to the 6500 platform.
Okay, so keep those questions coming for Edison. I'm just going to look through our queue here. Okay, so what's the difference between the congestion management techniques, that's the CBWFQ and the LRQ?
CBWFQ is to guarantee bandwidth on the link. When you're using PQ, which is priority queuing, is to dequeue the traffic before anything else. PQ is often recommended when you want to place voice in a queue. Bandwidth guarantee should be applied to mission critical or close signaling type of traffic.
Excellent. All righty. I have one here from Alexandra Reyes, and the question is, how does Auto QoS work?
Auto QoS should give you a basic template of what you're going to be implementing. We often recommend for networks to the small size to deploy Auto QoS instead of having no QoS at all. However, if you are really versed with QoS, we recommend that you apply manual QoS to fine-tune your applications. With that said, Auto QoS is a nice way to start your QoS deployment.
Okay, let's see here. Here's a question. Why can't I see the counters increment while typing show policy map interface on Catalyst switches?
Show policy map interface is a software counter. As you know, the ASIC built on switches is all read in hardware counters, so show policy map will not be reflecting that value. At the moment, it depends on the hardware that you're using. There are ways to see some counters, but they're not as effective. All counters will be made in hardware. So at the moment, we don't have a way to check for counters on some of the switches. With the 3750 and 3560, you could do show MLS QoS interface statistics to see some kind of counters. We don't have that feature right now on the 6500.
Okay. I have a question here from Clayton Kennett. What are the optimum circumstances to deploy Auto QoS?
If you're going to be having any voice over IP in your network, you need to have some Auto QoS implemented. That will guarantee that the voice traffic gets priority queuing end-to-end.
Okay, let's see here. Let me look through the queue real quick. We've got lots of questions coming in. If you want to apply QoS markings for my applications, where should I place the service policy?
You should apply the service policy as close to the source as possible. That way you will have the markings end-to-end, and you could actually implement egress queuing in a proper manner.
Okay, let me just take a look here in the queue again. Yeah, here we go. I've got a follow-up question from Kevin Colo, it looks like. If most 6500 line cards only support CoS instead of DSCP, what exactly is the difference between the MLS goes trust DSCP and the MLS QoS trust CoS commands?
The 6500 line cards support both. They support DSCP as well as class of service, which is CoS. When you're trusting CoS, the switch port will be looking for that one queue trunking marking. But if you have a regular connection to the IP phone, we recommend that you trust DSCP instead of trusting class of service.
Excellent. Now the questions are flying in. Let's see here. I have one from Jeff Garvis. Would you recommend putting the Cisco Agent desktop application into the mission critical or call signaling bucket?
This answer will depend on your business requirement. If that application is deemed to be critical, yes, you could place that application and mark it as AF41 if needed.
Okay. Okay, I have one here from Wade Crick. I need QoS to work in my head office location and in my branches. Will I need the service provider telco to provide QoS in the WAN cloud to make this work?
Yes, and you often have to work with the service provider, and they will actually instruct you what markings to send to them. So if you are agreeing with the service provider, they will provide you with a card pertaining with the markings that they will be accepting from you.
Okay, let's see here. Tons of questions coming in, so let me just plow through the queue real quick and see what I can find here. Let's see. Here we go. I've got one. This is also from Alexandra Reyes. Is the QoS only working after the bandwidth of the interface is full?
QoS will be checking for congestion. Let's say you have CVWS queue configured. It will only act upon congestion. If you have priority queuing, it will always be dequeuing the traffic before anything else. So it depends on what kind of queuing mechanisms you use.
Okay. Let me see here. Lots and lots of questions to plow through here. I just want to make sure I get to the right ones. Well, they're all the right ones, but I'm just trying to make sure I answer them in order. Here we go. Okay. When do we need to use per VLAN MLS QoS?
If you want to have a centralized location where to implement your service policy, you could implement per VLAN QoS. That way you will have a more scalable solution in your network. We also face a limitation within the 6500, where if you apply service policy input and multiple ports, you will run out of in the ASIC. So in the 6500 design, we recommend that you apply service policy at the VLAN level.
Okay, let's see here. Yeah, here we go. I got another one. From Eric Hallworth. You mentioned auto QoS in regards to voice over IP. What about video?
I'm afraid that video would have to be, they would have to have some customization built in video, because voice over IP will be addressing mostly voice by enabling PQ on egress. If you want to have the video portion also configured for auto QoS, you will actually work with auto QoS, start with a template, then build upon that template.
Okay, I got lots of questions now. This is from Paul Dial, where can one find the default QoS markings used by an iOS gateway? For example, 3845S that is being used as an MGCP gateway. How about for switches?
There is no default QoS mapping on switches. You'll have to actually map it manually. The mapping only exists on, there's no default mapping on routers. The mapping only exists on switches.
Okay. All right. So, and again, I don't want to murder this person's name, so I'm not going to say it. Can you tell me the optimal QoS design for government organization with VTC and voice over IP and other internet services?
That's a pretty broad question, and I'm afraid I won't be able to address that. But the best thing to do will be to categorize your applications, determine which applications are deemed to be mission critical. Make sure that you assign it to the proper class. As I went through the presentation, also you want to make sure that you are tagging your voice traffic accordingly, and you will allocate enough bandwidth for the class default.
Okay, I have one here from Kevin Blackburn. Where is the best place to police on a 6500 with a SUP 720-10 gigabyte-3C? On an SVI or physical interface, what's the best practices?
On the 6500, because of the limitation that I mentioned before in the ASIC, we recommend using MLS QoS VLAN base and apply the service policy inbound at the V-line.
Okay, here we go. This one is a little long, but I'll read it, and maybe read it twice here. It's from Bill Strutton. So with QoS for H.323 IP video from untrusted video endpoints and soft phones, we're told of risks of rogue applications hijacking the priority queue. But when we look at the alternative of using ACLS on 3750 Edge, so no NBAR, to classify RTP from sources other than Cisco phones, the UDP port range is so huge it looks like there is a real potential to have more risk of non-RTP applications that share that huge UDP high port range, actually causing more issues than if we had just trusted all ports to begin with and let the video endpoints and applications mark their own traffic. What are your thoughts on this?
If the applications are coming in marked already from the endpoint, then trusting would be an option. But then again, you're opening yourself to anyone marking themselves, and then that application would be overused in the class. What I recommend is that profile the application. I understand the range could be huge, but you should understand the application behavior and make sure that you are pinpointing to the UDP range that the application is actually using without opening the range to the normal range, which is 16.387 to 32. Don't quote me on that. 32K something. So I recommend that you are actually profiling the application to understand the behavior, and that way your ACL could be tight enough.
Okay. I have a question here from Karen Westmoreland again. Any guideline on how to set up QoS on the distribution access layer switches for telepresence?
The distribution depends on what kind of hardware it's being used. If you're using SUB 720 and you are using just regular line cards, pretty much just trusting the DSCP value coming in from the access switches should be enough.
Okay. This is from Cynthia Schaefer. All Cisco shop with QoS for voice over MPLS WAN will be deploying video in the next few months and currently utilize 4Q QoS method. Any thoughts or comments on that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure. All Cisco shops with QoS for voice over MPLS WAN will they be deploying video in the next few months and currently utilizing 4Q QoS method? Maybe we need more information on that question in order to be able to answer it. So let me look here at the next one. Okay, here we go. Do you have any additional? Sorry, I lost my cue. It refreshed. Do you have any additional or modified recommendations if QoS campuses are connected with each other via WAN or MAN?
If you're connecting over a MAN, it's simply the same connection or the same principle that you will use if you're connecting within a single LAN. You will be trusting DSCP on the interswitch links if you have switches. And if you have routers, you will have the ability to do MQC CLI, which provide you with a higher level of queuing techniques, like using CBWFQ or LLQ for voice.
Okay. I have here one from Alex Indenbaum. When you want to implement QoS for telepresence throughout the campus and you don't control WAN, what is the best option to implement? And do you have to do it close to the source and to the CD of the WAN or end-to-end?
I suggest marking the telepresence packet or the telepresence flow close to the source. So if you know where the telepresence unit is connected, make sure you apply an inbound service policy with appropriate markings, or just trust DSCP. Then, on the interswitch links, make sure that you enable MLS QoS trust DSCP, so the packet marking will be preserved end-to-end.
Excellent. Okay, I have one here from Honor Karaka. Can we separate QoS into two different interfaces on a router?
I'm afraid not.
That was a quick answer. Let's see here. No, I'm just kidding. I have plenty more here in the queue. From Churia Doran, is there any simulator or tool to learn more QoS techniques? Let's suppose that I don't have any SEP 16/32/720 for tests.
You could actually download Dynamaps and apply and start implementing QoS and play around with QoS. I'm afraid that Dynamaps only support iOS routers. It will not do switching QoS. But it will get you a basic understanding of how QoS works and what kind of techniques to implement.
Okay. I have one here from Hari Naik. Assuming I have QoS for web traffic set for higher priority and there is a denial of service web attack, I don't see how QoS can mitigate such attack. I guess my question is, where can I find more info on how QoS helps reduce a DDoS attack?
You could actually apply service policy inbound on the client PCs and then determine based on the ACL if the traffic is greater than your normal traffic. Again, you must profile applications to understand what is normal versus abnormal. So once you determine that the application pattern is abnormal, you could remark that packet to CS1 and then go to the egress point of your network and then drop any CS1 marked traffic.
Okay, I have a question here from Jamie Lundane. Would you consider deploying Auto QoS in a large network?
Auto QoS will provide a great template for you to start with. If you apply Auto QoS, you can later modify Auto QoS for your design. So yes, I recommend to start off with Auto QoS. If you're not comfortable enough with QoS.
Okay, just looking through the queue here. What is scavenger traffic?
Scavenger traffic is just a marking that is being designed to determine what is the traffic that is unwanted or less than best effort. So if you mark something for scavenger, you can later determine and group them and determine that traffic will be dropped when congestion really occurs.
I have a question here from Paul Dial. Where can one find the default QoS markings used by an iOS gateway? Oh, sorry, we already took care of that one earlier. Here we go. I have another one here. Where should DBL dynamic buffer limit be applied?
It should be applied into the distribution switches.
Okay. Any guidelines on how to set up QoS on the distribution or access layer switches for telepresence?
The guideline will be to always guarantee the bandwidth and also depends on the telepresence unit that you have. The guidelines will be usually come with the packages of the telepresence. So you must allocate bandwidth guarantee for traffic flow coming and going into the telepresence.
Okay, let's see here. Just looking through the queue. We've got lots of questions in here. So this one, can you tell me about the optimal QoS design? Sorry, we already talked about that one as well. Okay, here we go. How can I limit, and this is from Churia Doran, how can I limit the output for some users /IP on an egress interface for any traffic, similar to HTTP on Linux?
If you have a Catalyst 6500 Sub 720 or Catalyst 4500, you could implement per user microflow policing at the distribution layer and limit the traffic per user flows.
Okay. Just looking through our list here. Got more questions in the queue. You said Auto QoS is fine for small installs. What's a small install?
Small install I will see in a small LAN location where you have 25 to 100 users. If you have a large location where you have a multiple LAN design, we recommend doing an end-to-end design by doing manual QoS.
Okay. I have a question here from Alexandro Riaz. What is the best way to identify DOS traffic, to put this traffic in the scavenger queuing?
As I stated before, it will be by profiling your traffic. You must determine what is normal versus abnormal. Applications will vary depending on the usage, so you have to profile your traffic to determine if for instance, if the web traffic is normal, versus abnormal. If the traffic goes over the threshold, you must identify that and place that traffic as a CS1 type of traffic.
Okay. Keep those questions coming, everybody. I got another one here. Can I assign QoS on ASA 5520 for users or PCs?
ASAs is out of the scope for this presentation, but I will address that QoS most likely will be preserved within the ASA. I'm not 100% sure how the ASA will treat QoS within.
And then, I'm looking through the questions we've got submitted here. Again, please take advantage. We've got about 10 minutes or so left here before we get into our closure of the event. So shall I go on to the next question here, Edison?
Sure.
Great. Let's see. Is there... sorry, here we go. I should simulate the telco WAN 2M line in Cisco 3750 switch. What is the best way for the QoS on 3750?
The best way for 3750 switches will be to trust DSCP if you know that the source is to be trusted. If the source is not to be trusted, you will classify your DSCP assignments by using service policy inbound and then matching on ACLs based on the traffic source.
Okay. I have one here. It's a little lengthy, so if you want me to repeat it, just let me know. Why does Cisco promote such a granular traffic classification process? For example, or e.g. 11 in the QoS baseline module, when in your flagship switch, the Cisco Catalyst 6500, you only support the use of CoS for queuing. This is a three-part question, or two-part question, so let's start with part one.
The Catalyst 6500 supports DSCP as well as class of service, which is CoS.
Okay. The second part of that question was, when will Cisco standardize on the hardware queuing mechanism, as there is no point offering 1P7Q8T, as in the WS-6704-10GE, which gives 57 locations of queuing traffic, but as it's stuck with the class of service, we can only use 8 of those locations.
It is in the pipeline to standardize the queuing on the 6500. In the meantime, you must understand that the ASIC or QoS is implemented in ASIC on the 6500. So it's really hard for us to come up with a unified method of implementing QoS on the 6500.
Okay, let's see here. Is there any SMP MIB available on Catalyst switches to monitor drops and queues?
I believe the QoS MIB will be able to identify that. I know I'm familiar with the policy map. If you're running a policy map on the QoS, but it's in the routers, you will be able to see some MIB indicators. Again, I recommend going for the MIB locator on the Cisco website for MIBs available to track SNMP information.
Yeah, let's see here. And Edison, you're doing a fabulous job with all these questions that we're throwing at you, and the audience is definitely taking advantage of this opportunity. So what is MDRR, whether it's supported on 4500 or in 6500 switches?
MBAR is not supported on ASIC switches. MBAR is only supported at the moment on Catalyst 6500, Supervisor 32, PISA.
Okay. Let's see here. Where can I submit my ideas to Cisco for QoS and routers, etc.?
You could submit ideas by going to any of the publications that we have for QoS. You could also go to the Idea Center and NetPro.
And just for everyone, the NetPro URL is www.cisco.com/go/netpro. Let's see here. Okay, this is from Jason Wang. In hub-and-spoke topology, should we be shaping or policing egress traffic from hub side to avoid ingress congestion at the spoke side? Would the 7200 VXR support the function?
Yes, the 7200 VSR support both shaping and policing on egress. We recommend to shape the traffic so the drop could be linear. If you go with policing, every traffic within the class will be dropped immediately. Shaping provides some dynamic cues, so traffic will be actually delayed instead of immediately drop. So with that said, I recommend going with shaping for exceeded traffic on egress. Okay,
let me climb through our queue here and see what we've got. In regards to that question that was asking about where they could submit ideas for routers and switches, the URL there again was www.cisco.com/go-netpro, and there's the Idea Center area on NetPro specifically. Okay, I have a question here from Lee B. I don't want to murder your last name, so I won't say it. Do you know of any inexpensive tools or utilities to quickly set up and then send and receive different combinations of blended QoS marked sessions?
Sure. The most inexpensive tool is within iOS by using just a ping and using the type of service on the ping. If you do an extended ping, you are allowed to put a type of service on the ping, so that type of service will be translated to any markings you need to have. You could also use IP SLA monitor on the Cisco iOS to test your QoS mechanisms.
Let's see here, just looking through the queue again. We got about 5 minutes before we're going to be wrapping up here, so hopefully we'll be able to get to these last questions that are coming in. I'm just making sure I'm not asking any that have already been asked. So let's see here. What do I have? Could you recommend some QoS design guides or a space to find some QoS design guides?
The best guideline that I could recommend to everyone is to visit the QoS SNRD for the best practices recommended by Cisco at this moment. If you go into www.cisco.com, go SNRD, you will find the latest QoS publication by the subject matter experts.
Let's see here. What else do we have? Got many questions coming through here, so I'm just trying to filter and see what we've got in. Let's see here. I got a question here about an Avaya phone from Ben Del Rosario. What is the best way to QoS an Avaya phone?
The best way to QoS the Avaya phone would be to either set the phone with a voice VLAN and an access VLAN, or to go with the trunking method. If the Avaya phone does not support the aux VLAN, then I recommend going with the trunking option. Make sure that you are trusting the port, so any markings coming from the Avaya phone, which are often DSCP46 or Class of Service 5, are preserved.
Great. And I think we got time for one last question here, and this one is from Dustin Simpson. The question is, if I simulate the telco WAN 512 kilobyte per second line and Cisco 3750 switch, could I simulate the 512K rate limiting or rate policing? And if so, what is the best method for rate limiting and rate policing?
It's very hard to simulate 512 unless you have a traffic generator. You won't be able to do that with regular iOS. There's some limiting built in within the CPU to protect that kind of traffic. If you want to simulate or you want to prevent, if you want to apply a policy inbound on the switch for that kind of traffic, then you will apply a service policy inbound and do a policer, which it will meet that demand. And if the traffic is exceeded, then you can mark the traffic to something else. For instance, if you have 512, but if it goes over 512, then you apply and you will conform traffic you will be marking with IPDSCP46, and anything over that to be remarked down to either a lower class or just CS1.
Okay, well, we're almost at the top of the hour, so I think that we are in good shape here. I really want to thank everyone for taking the time, and I'd especially like to thank Edison for joining me today. That concludes today's NetPro Ask the Expert event. Before signing off, I will ask that you take a moment to complete the evaluation of today's session. It will help us address your business needs and interests in the future, really to help us understand if we have been able to meet your expectations. And I'm seeing quite a few thank yous coming in for you, Edison, as well from the audience's questions. So
you're welcome.
Thank you again for joining. We're going to go ahead and close the event out. And again, as I said, please take a moment to complete that evaluation. We do hope that you enjoyed this live NetPro Ask the Expert event in Cisco Live and Networkers Virtual. I encourage you to explore the virtual environment, including the Cisco booth in the World of Solutions, the on-demand technical sessions in the auditorium, and also our blog center. If you have not explored the NetPro Cisco support community, you should take a moment to see all this program has to offer at www.cisco.com/go/netpro. Again, thank you very much to everybody for logging in, and that concludes our event.